Congressman Mark Green. Congressman is also an ER doctor and a combat vet. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jerome. Appreciate it.
I love individuals, Congressman, who wear multiple hats. You're ER doctor and a combat veteran. And I was talking to our Pentagon reporter, Christina Wong, and she was explaining to me, Congressman, what has to happen now between Congress and the Defense Department as it pertains to those military members who, were punished or demoted or retired early because they did not want to take the vaccine. So the the COVID vax repeal has been included in the NDAA, which is good news. But my question is now, what happens to those military members? Those many of them had the virus and therefore had natural immunity to it, but were still found themselves on the receiving end of some sort of harassment. Sort of give us the wide view of what it took to get the mandate repeal into the bill and what happens now.
Yeah, so, in terms of getting it done, it basically took Kevin McCarthy telling the president that we would not support the NDAA, if a mandate repeal wasn't in it. And that hard line is what moved the president. And this, you're right, this is sort of the first step of just getting rid of the mandate for anybody that comes in and for anyone who is still in the process of their religious exemption or whatever. That this only affects, sort of the go forward. So we've got to go back in the next National Defense Authorization Act and make sure that we reinstate those that have been removed if they want to, and make sure that their records are clean and that there are no adverse actions taken against those individuals for their choice. The tragedy is this thing was just so politically executed as opposed to making any sense in terms of readiness. You take the Marine Corps, for example. I think it was 3,700 or so Marines that requested the religious exemption, 11 given. I think in the Coast Guard, not a single person was given an exemption. So it was very clear that this was, completely political, and we've got to go back and take care of those folks who've had their careers maligned.
Congressman, how did we get here? I mean, you brought up the politicization of the process. The vax mandate repeal is tied to recruitment numbers. And correct me if I'm wrong, just about every branch of the military was already struggling to fill and meet recruitment quotas. I just don't understand. Like, are there just not people in the DOD who realize that they are literally setting themselves up for failure? I mean, this is national security we're talking about. I understand that politics invades just about every facet of non-political, government agencies. But I mean, look at what's happening to the DOJ. But I mean, this one has to be different. And I don't understand exactly how we got here, because this doesn't necessarily, to me anyway, Congressman, fit in the wokeification of the Pentagon and our armed forces. I mean, this is very healthy individuals. I mean, you're the combat veteran, Congressman. You tell me. I mean, these are very healthy individuals. Many of them have had the virus. Many of them have religious reasons why they don't want to take it, and it becomes political to the level that they were harassed and maligned and maybe felt forced to retire early. And now the DOD basically has to be forced to bring these people back, make sure that their records are clean when and if they come back. I don't know how we got here, and I don't really know how it gets fixed.
Well, in terms of fixing it, it's just bringing these guys back in and communicating that there's no longer the requirement to the recruiting people. But you're right. I mean, you hit on the crux of this thing: is how could we have ever gotten here? And it really shocks the mind, because early on we knew that COVID predominantly caused fatality and serious illness in the elderly. But we were putting masks on little kids, and the figures were astonishing. I mean, mathematically near zero, if not zero. But in the military age group, very few people got seriously ill with COVID.
Right.
However, the vaccine mandate, if you look at the National Guard, there were 62,000 that were deemed non-deployable because they wouldn't take the vaccine. 62,000. I mean, an entire division is only about 20,000. So, think of the combat power just in the Guard. Then you look at its impact on recruiting. The Army missed its recruiting objective by 15,000 people.
Yep.
25%. And you look geographically at where, the aversion to the vaccine versus where the recruiting numbers come from and all of that. And it's pretty clear the correlation is the vaccine to those decreased recruiting numbers. So add 15,000 to 62,000. I mean, that's a huge number hit to the readiness of the force, and yet you've got Lloyd Austin screaming that they have to have the vaccine in order to be ready to deploy to combat. And it is so idiotic that it just blows them. Everybody scratches their head and goes, "Wait, how in the heck did we get here?" It makes no sense. I don't, if there's some kind of vaccine religion, I don't know. But in this particular case, clearly that was the case. Vaccines make sense in the military. I took the anthrax vaccine. I took smallpox. I took Japanese encephalitis virus. I mean, a unit has to be able to deploy to a region of the world and not have half the force go down with an illness. I get that. And I support the concepts of vaccination. But in this particular case, the science just didn't make any sense. And yet they, put all the cards on the table, risk the national security. And right now the force is depleted, massively depleted because of this vaccine mandate. Yet they're making the argument that for readiness, they got to have a vaccine mandate. It's just the stupidest thing. It makes no sense. And you can't really come up with a good reason why.
The mass murderers who run the government in Beijing knew more about this virus than they let on. And they lied for months to World Health Organization. They lied to the Trump administration for months. Meanwhile, the virus spread. Chinese officials disappeared, we'll say, doctors who treated patients with the virus early on but wanted to speak out about it but couldn't. Journalists had the same fate. We fast forward 2.5 years, Congressman, and it feels like the way that people in our government and at the Pentagon, at the DOD, it feels, Congressman, like the punishment and the level of ire and retribution has been worse for, I don't know, the first responder, the actual medical healthcare professional, the teacher, the law enforcement official, the military service member who have been fired or laid off or kicked out of their jobs, unable to make a living for their family. It feels like the retribution against the American people has been way worse than anything that the people running China actually deserve for the pandemic, the Black Plague level death that they actually allowed to befall the world. I that's where I'm at, because I've had conversations with people in just about every professional walk of life. And I guess that's my question. I don't know how we get to a place where we know that these bastards allow this virus to spread, and yet our reaction is to punish our military service members, to punish our first responders, to torture our children for 2 years. But it's just good to know. It's good to know that we at least have your voice in Congress fighting for it.
Well, you're kind to say that, and I fought very early on, first to make sure that the soldiers who and sailors, airmen, Marines who were actually booted didn't get a dishonorable discharge. The president was actually fighting to be able to do that. Believe it or not, men and women who've gone down range, fought for the country, served honorably, and then they're going to get a dishonorable discharge for a religious exemption on this vaccine. But they were willing to go that far. I had the amendment that was to last year's NDAA that kept that from happening. They at least get an honorable discharge. So, it's been a fight all along against this woke. I don't know if woke is the right term for this one,
sure,
but idiotic certainly fits it for me.
So I had one of our reporters, John Bender, on. John he goes into sort of the interior of the country when it comes to immigration. Tom Tillis and Kirsten Sinema are basically doing the bidding of lobbyists right now, trying to push through an amnesty with the that would essentially just legalize millions of people. But anyway, there's good news, I guess. The Texas Department of Public Safety troopers assigned to Operation Lone Star are actually making headway in reducing the number of migrant gotaways making their way into the U.S. interior. This is a good thing. A large part of the conversation, Congressman, that I had with John Bender is about the sheer numbers of illegal immigrants entering the country, but also the fact that the Biden administration seems to be going out of its way to make it harder to deport even the worst of the worst, those illegal immigrants, many of them committing heinous crimes. But it's at least good to see Governor Greg Abbott and Operation Lone Star making some headway.
Yeah, what Governor Abbott is doing is it still isn't fixing the problem, because
right.
We've got a president who basically has opened entirely our southern border and given control of the southern border over to the drug cartels. I mean, they basically have operational control of our southern border. What Abbott is doing with not only his state guard but with other law enforcement elements is curtailing it to some degree. I met with a guy who was a part of Operation Lone Star. He was actually a Tennessean who was a member of the State Guard down in Texas, and he went down and spent 8 months in Laredo South. That's probably one of the most lawless districts on the border, and his description of what's happening is just unconscionable. But, you talk about the folks who are trying to get us to immigration reform. You can't, the southern border, I think of it like a doctor. It's an arterial bleed. You have to go through your triage, and you can't address comprehensive immigration reform until we secure the border. That's been, an articulated and believed stance for a long time. I mean, you just physically can't do that. They're allowing 3.5 million people to come in this year alone, and just granting amnesty will make that, it's like taking Title 42 off, which, by the way, happens here very shortly.
Yeah.
And it just will overwhelm them. I mean, we're overwhelmed now, but what the president is doing, everything they're doing is to basically fundamentally change the nature of our country. And it's really, whether it's crime in the cities or crime at the southern border, they'll accept the lawlessness over just common sense rulemaking. It's really crazy.
Congressman Mark Green joined the program right now. So I updated the audience on what I call the Twitter Files Breitbart edition. We got information that pretty much explains that executives within Twitter were in constant contact with federal officials in the FBI, the DNI, and they twisted rules to blacklist Donald Trump. They were monitoring communication at Breitbart News. Our reach was stifled on the platform, but they did it to an untold number of other people who had the wrong political opinions. How is the Twitter files sort of landing in the Republican conference? And what can the audience, Congressman, expect when Kevin McCarthy is given the gavel and becomes Speaker?
Yeah, you're going to see, and I've heard from Kevin on multiple, media outlets as well as in our conference, looking into the collusion that actually happened between Twitter and the Democrat Party, and it's going to be heavily investigated. I think he's already talked about upwards of 50 subpoenas that will be filed to try to get to the bottom of this, because it's not only just suppressing it in the media, it's actually turning a blind eye to crime that happened and giving people a pass. And the DOJ doesn't get to make that choice. They don't get to pick and choose what laws they enforce and on whom those laws get enforced. So this is a very big issue. It has tentacles that go a lot of different directions. And there will be a massive investigation on it. People will be held accountable.
Congressman, I am a Jacksonville Jaguars season ticket holder. I'm told that you knew this and you still joined the program despite my team beating down your Tennessee Titans yesterday. So for that, I want to give an extra thank you.
Yeah. Well, I actually was born in Jacksonville. I don't support the Jags, but I was born in Jacksonville, and my family moved to Mississippi, and I grew up in Mississippi as a Saints fan, and then spent 24 years in the Army. But we love our Titans, we love our balls in Tennessee, so that makes me a huge fan, and that's okay. I mean, I understand you win some, you lose some. We had a big victory this weekend. Army beat Navy. I'm a West Point grad, so
I saw that.
And it was historic because it was double overtime.
Yeah.
The first in 122 years these two teams have played, and the first time it ever went into overtime, which is kind of hard to believe, but we won, and so I'm on cloud nine. There's nothing that can happen that'll knock me off that cloud for a while.
All right, Congressman, we appreciate you joining the program. It's good stuff. We'll have you back.
Yeah, take care, Jerome. Thank you.